Welcome to another segment of Buddycast. Now, I've got a special treat for all you buddies out there. I've got a really great buddy of mine, a man who you might all know from America's Got Talent, or if you've seen him on stage, my pal, Greg Morton. How you doing today, buddy?
Good, Nick. How are you doing, buddy?
I'm doing amazing now that you're on the show.
Good to be on the Buddycast with you, my buddy.
Absolutely. Everyone's a buddy here, man, but you and me have been buddy for how long now? I think it's been 2 years.
Yeah, 2 years.
Yeah. We met at juniors all those years ago, and you gave me some great advice that I'm hoping you can share with the audience, you know?
Don't get into comedy?
Yeah. Yeah.
No kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah. But let's start out with that. How did you get into comedy?
Well, I guess to make a long story short, I went to this place that had a comedy night, and it was right next door to a steakhouse. And I went to see my first show, loved it. Actually, it wasn't my first show. It was my, more than that, because, no, here's what happened. It was a college trip. That's what it was, a college trip with some friends of mine. And we had a great English class. And our English professor was always trying to get us to experience new and creative things because, you know, my major was animation. And so he'd expose us to plays, improv comedy, stand-up comedy, whatever he thought would help us. So he took us to see Second City. He took us to comedy clubs. And the one night that he took us to a comedy club, well, that was it, man. We were just got bitten by the bug. And at the time, a friend of mine and I, we were doing funny songs. They weren't song parodies. They were original songs. Like my friend, he had gone to university and majored in music, and he was writing original pieces of music. And then I would just come up with the lyrics, funny lyrics. Now, a lot of them, the songs were pretty dirty, you know, filthy. It was college, you know. So we were a big, huge hit at the college. But when we went to the comedy club, we said, well, could we get on stage? And the owner said, yeah, sure. Come on out on Tuesday night. We encourage it. That's our new talent night. And we came out and we killed. But of course, the whole audience was full of college students. So then the next time we came and we ate it. So
That's usually how
it was a great experience, though. And I didn't revisit comedy until years after that. It wasn't until after I had gotten out of animation and had my own business, and I was working as a disc jockey, mobile disc jockey. I had my own business in that. So, but that's how I got a lot of my stage time, because I was on stage every weekend, you know, doing weddings and parties and dances, and I would open up my show with 5 to 10 minutes of comedy. That's how I got my stage time, and then I'd play records. So,
nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Then one night I got heckled. These guy go, play the music, and I go, okay, now it's time to make the transition into comedy.
So. Absolutely. Hey, speaking of hecklers, do you have any good heckler stories for us?
Heckler stories? I don't know about heckler stories. Let me think here. I had one lady. I've had a lot of hecklers. So I'm just trying to think of the best one.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you what, an interesting one. I had this guy. Okay, I went into this bar where they had comedy, and the first thing the barkeep says is he hands me this microphone, and he says, "I'm going to give you this microphone. It's a cordless microphone. Do you know how much these things cost?" I go, "Yeah, they're about $1,000." He says, "That's right. So don't break the microphone. The comedian that was here last week, he broke the microphone. So don't break the microphone." I go, "Yeah, I got it." So I get up on stage, and it's one of these bars where, you know, it's like out of the Blues Brothers, where you'd have chicken wire in the front, you know, and they're not listening. Everybody's drinking. They're not paying attention. So I go to my improv skills. I figure, hey, I'll improvise. I'll make something up out of this. So I go, I start picking on this guy. I said, "Oh, look at this guy, you guys," because the way he was talking to his friend, his arms were going like just wild and crazy. And I started making fun of him, saying he looked like the robot from Lost in Space, and he kind of looked like the lead singer from the Spin Doctors. And I kept zinged him a couple of ones, and he says, "Look, if you don't go back to your little skit, I'm going to take that microphone and stick it where the sun don't shine." And as he's saying that, his hand comes out and it wraps around the top of the microphone, and he snaps the top off like it's a carrot. It just makes this sickening crunch sound. So I hold up the microphone, and the head is just dangling by two little wires. I do Bugs Bunny. I go, "Oh, Mr. Manager," and you can see him in the back. He goes, "Oh." he does this he does this huge face palm, and then the next thing I know, I hear this rip, and he grabs my shirt and he pulls it like this, and I'm going like, "Well, I guess we're fighting. I don't know how to fight, but I guess we're fighting." So I start doing the windmill, and I have arms are going like this. Two of the biggest bouncers come out of nowhere. They jump on me first. And they go, "Settle down, settle down." I go, okay, look, I'm just trying to protect myself. I look over at this guy. There's 5 or 6 other guys on him, and they're trying to wrestle him to the ground. Well, they call the cops, and the cops are big guys. They look like RCMP. I mean, they're huge out there. This is in Western Canada. And They come in and they arrest this guy. They take him to jail. Now, keep in mind that I still have to do my show, but the microphone is broken, and the only microphone that works is the microphone at the DJ booth, and it's one of those little gooseneck microphones. Terrible. So I'm standing up in the DJ booth, and the only time that people would laugh is when I talk about almost getting my ass kicked. I finish my half hour, I get my check, and I get the heck out of there. So that's probably one of the worst ones, worst heckle situations that I've had. But I've had some doozies, let me tell you.
That's one of those moments where at the end of your show, "That's all, folks."
Joke.
Now, speaking of impressions, when I saw you on America's Got Talent, you did a lot of impressions. How did you find your passion for doing impressions?
I just did it automatically. I always mimicked cartoons. My mom said that when I was a little kid, I would mimic whatever was on TV. So, and that back then there were only about 2 or 3 channels. That's all you had to watch. So, Saturday morning I would watch cartoons. Sunday afternoon, Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner and the Roadrunner show would come on. I'd watch that. Or a noon hour, I'd watch cartoons. And that's when I started mimicking voices.
Nice.
Yeah.
How long does it usually take? Like, if you ever create a new impression, how long does it usually take for you to perfect it or to create it in your mind?
It depends. I did one recently, Idris Elba, and that took me about 2 days, 2 or 3 days, I'd say. And I had to really listen to the voice, then let it go, just sleep on it, come back, and then it would gradually start to come in. And that's a complicated one because I had to get the accent and we are canceling the apocalypse, and I had to get that whole thing going, and I had to speak normally like that character too. Now I can't do it now, but this is going back a few months when I was working on that character. But some of them take a little more work than others. Others are easy. I can do it immediately. Just, oh yeah, I got that one. Or sometimes if I hear somebody do it, I can hear the way they've broken it down. See, that's like almost like being given a combination to a safe, and you just march right in and do it. It's a lot like singing. So if it's in your vocal range, it's a lot easier to do. You can do it, no problem. But if it's outside of your range, that's when it becomes really difficult. See, every voice has a pitch, so you figure out where that is,
Is it in here? Is it kind of in here? Oh, maybe it's a little higher. Or maybe it's a little lower. And then maybe you got to put some grit into it. Or maybe you put an accent. Oh, hey, what are you talking about? You talking about, hey, you trying to get tough with me? Hey, come on. Yeah, bring it on. Let's see what I can do. Or maybe it's a little slower, or it's from the southern United States, and you just kind of just roll with it. Whatever you've got to do, mate, you just do it. It's not that, it's if you've heard it a lot, and it just goes inside the back of your brain, and you just, so that's how I come up with all these different voices and different characters, and just from listening to people and coming up with different voices and characters. And then you take that on stage and you start wrapping it around your tongue and like that. And then, of course, it helps to get into it physically. The physical aspect of the character, that really helps bring the voice out.
That was amazing. Do that on the spot, too. That was
well, I've been doing it a long time, so and I would do impressions of teachers and things like that, and different characters. And I grew up in a time when it was all variety shows. When I was coming up, we had the Flip Wilson show, Sonny and Cher, the Carol Burnett show. So all these stars would come on, and they did characters all the time. They had impressionists, and they had people who did voices. So it was easy for me. I'd go and I would mimic those characters, and then I'd go to school and I'd put on skits at school in the playground when we were out for recess. Absolutely. Dean Martin's show, so much fun. All those characters, but they were really broad, very vaudeville-esque type characters. Red Skelton show, that was another great show that had a lot of famous comedians. And I used to have, I would study a lot. A lot of it was just for entertainment, I thought, but I guess I was studying. I guess some of it must have got in my head because when I was a kid, I painted this one wall in my room white, and then I put a border of sort of psychedelic wallpaper on either side, and I made it into a cinema. And then I'd go to the library, and I would take out old classics like Laurel and Hardy and Charlie Chaplin, and study comedy. And I didn't even know. I just loved it. That's all. Some of these old films were silent films, 8mm. And I would set up my record player, and I'd play my records as the backdrop for some of the movies. And sometimes the lyrics would coincidentally go along with whatever was happening on screen. It was always very funny, and I really enjoyed it. I still have a great love for movies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite movies, by the way?
My favorite movies? I have several. Let's see, Star Wars, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Pulp Fiction, The Godfather, Jaws. That's another one of my favorite movies. Lord of the Rings, a lot of fantasy. I really love Glengarry Glen Ross. That's a classic. I can watch that over and over again. No Country for Old Men. That's another one of my favorites. Mm-hmm. Anything that I love, I collect. If I can watch it more than once.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It sounded like you got a lot of classics in there too.
I do. I have a whole set of DVDs. I've got about 3 binders full of DVDs. And I've got a huge, thick binder of Blu-rays as well. And then I just, and then after a while, you're like, I got to stop collecting. I can't. Even though I would love to collect everything. I mean, there's so many things. I have a whole collection of the Marx Brothers movies. I'd like to get, sorry about that. I'd like to get some more, what's the other one? Laurel and Hardy. That's some of my favorites. And, Abbott and Lou Costello. Love that too. So,
love those guys. Who's on first?
What's that?
Who's on first?
Who's on first? That's right, baby.
Yeah. You ever see the one 7 times 13 equals 28?
No.
Look that one up. It's he does this whole math problem. 7 times 13 equals 28.
Oh, that would make my head hurt.
Yep. Now, Let me ask you, you were on America's Got Talent. You made it pretty far. What inspired you to go on the show?
I felt like it was a good fit for me because it's a variety show, and my act is very rooted in that variety sort of thing. I didn't know I'd be doing what I'd be doing. They were really keen on me doing impressions, and as you know, you've seen me before. I don't do just impressions. I do a little bit of everything. My show is kind of a one-person variety show, and. So after I'd done, they said, "What do you want to do first?" I go, I got to do Star Wars. So I do Star Wars. Join me, Luke. Join me on the dark side. I'll never join you. Hello, Master Luke. Master Luke. Red leader to gold leader standing by. Gold leader, red leader standing by. Look out, Corkins. Shut the look Utiwaka loko solo. Utuchabawaka. Yes, go ahead, young Skywalker. Join me and your father in attack. Sight of the Force. Good. So after that, they said, "What else you got?" So I showed them a couple other things. I said, "Well, I'd like to do Lord of the Rings," but it wasn't enough. They could. You know what happened on the show? They have to get clearance for everything because, well, of course, you know that copyright.
Yeah.
And so I couldn't just do Lord of the Rings. I thought, well, I got this made. I've been doing Lord of the Rings for quite a few years now. I've got this down pat. I can't lose. You have no pass. And they said, well, what if we did more voices? Let's do a whole bunch of different. This is because everybody has their own producer on the show, and come up with ideas for the show. And so I put some things together, and she suggested some movies, and a lot of them were voices I had never done before. So I'm putting this whole thing together, and she says, "Okay, that's good. Send me a tape." I go, I sent her a tape. Okay, we got to tweak it. Maybe change the order, or can we do something different? Or let's add some more movies. And then I go back and re-record it, and then send it out again. And then they'd look at it, and then she'd show it around and to the other producers. And so after the first show, I was flying by the seat of my pants. Like I didn't know what we were coming up with something new every time, and it was closer level of material. Like this is these bits that I was doing were bits that I would use to close with. And I thought, well, I know what the formula is. I know how I came up with the first one. And really the first one, Star Wars, was just an accident, a happy accident. I was on stage, I was clearing up my gear, and the bartender, he was a huge Star Wars fan, and he throws on the theme to Star Wars, right? And so I'm at the microphone. I just start goofing off, and I'm doing all the different sound effects. He says, "Man, you should put that in your show. What are you doing? That should be in your show." So I played around with it a little bit, just doing little voices here and there. But another comedian who I had worked with before, his name was Uncle Dirty. Now, Uncle Dirty, his career was in the 60s and early 70s. He used to hang out with Richard Pryor. He was really good buds with him. And Richard Pryor used to say, Dirty knows comedy. And he did. He really knew comedy. And he gave me some great advice. He said, "Kid, you should take that, put it into a bit and into a whole piece, and then you should open with it." And I said, "Open with it? That's like a closer." He says, "No, man, if you open with it, you won't have to work as hard. It'll be like, bam, everybody knows that you've come here to bring the goods, and you're not going to disappoint, and you're going to make your job a lot easier." And so that was a really great lesson that I learned about comedy. from Uncle Dirty is that if you open with a really, really strong joke, something that you might normally close with, it makes the rest of your work a lot easier.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I always ask this for my buddy casts. For someone looking to go into comedy, what's your advice to them?
Well, I would say study. You should study a lot. I don't think a lot of guys do their homework, or if they study their favorite, whoever that may be. Now, unfortunately, unconsciously or subconsciously, you end up copying your mentor, and you start to sound a lot like them. Like I remember in the 80s and the 90s, a lot of people sounded like Seinfeld. Now, a lot of people sound like Bill Barr, or they sound like Louis C.K. And there can only be one of those. You have to bring out your original voice, whatever that is. And you're never going to hear that if you're always listening to this mentor. In fact, you should be listening to somebody who's physically different in appearance from you, so that you don't have that crossover. That's actually a good thing. Or you listen to so many different people, but it's hard to do. I mean, when you first start, you're just learning, so you just want to be funny, and you do whatever you can to be funny. That's why a lot of people curse. I would recommend working clean, because it makes it so much easier in the long run. Because if you start out dirty, then you got to clean it up later. You got to clean it up sooner or later, right? I mean, and that's where a lot of the work is. I mean, if you want to do corporates, or you want to be on television, now I'm not saying that's the rule. I mean, there are always exceptions to the rule. If you look around, right, you can see other comics who they're an exception to that rule. But I just think it makes it easier. And if you think that way, it's easier to figure out the construct of a joke. Now, if you drop the F-bomb, it's a shock. So people are going to laugh, obviously. Some of these things are still taboo in our society. So it's an easy laugh. But, I do get it, though. I mean, when you're up there, you feel very uncomfortable, and that can become a real security blanket. And but I just think it's good to keep it clean if you can, and learn the joke structure and how to write a joke. And I would highly recommend listening to Steve Martin and Woody Allen as to learn joke structure. They're two of the greatest writers, comedy writers you'll ever listen to. They're so good at what they do. And George Carlin. Now, George Carlin is a completely different thing. Like, if you listen to George, he will actually change your brain. It's almost like pot or something. Maybe that's after effects from all the pot that he smoked, but he affects a certain part of the brain where you'll start thinking in a certain way. You won't necessarily write like George Carlin, but he'll get you to think in a more analytical way, which is what we are. We are analysts, we are observers, and we take things that we see, and we may show people where the humor is in all of those things. And looking for the twist and the flip, I don't know, not so much now. Now I see a lot of young guys telling stories, which is good. They're storytellers, and they talk about their lives, which is important, because that means you're going to have your original material, because it didn't happen to anybody else but you. So it's a good thing. But they forget that when you tell a story, it has to have laughs all along the way in order to be a good storyteller. So you got to go, okay, I can set up I'll say one thing that might be a fact in my story. The fact is that my hair caught on fire, getting too close to a light socket. I don't know, whatever it is, and maybe that's a fact. So then what's the punchline? You got to figure out, where does that go? And so that you have laughs all the way through your storyline. Otherwise, you just have a long, rambling story that goes nowhere. I mean, nobody wants to listen to that. So you practice on your friends, and you see how that goes. And if it doesn't, well, then you've got to retool your story. It's a real art being a good storyteller. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Now, let's go back a little bit in time. Do you remember when you first started out in comedy?
What do you mean? When I first started out?
Like, do you remember like the early stages, like your first open mics, your first paid show, your first?
Yeah. My first open mic. That's the story I was going to tell you. I was in this club that was next to a steakhouse, and I went to see a show, and something about it, the voice in the back of my head said, "Greg, you could do this." And I thought, yeah, I think I could do this. I mean, I've been studying comedy for a long time, and I love comedy. I go to all these different concerts and the clubs and that. I should try it, because I always did skits and things like that in school. So I went to a club and I talked to one of the comics there, and he gave me a lot of great advice. And I wrote some notes. I wrote down everything that he told me, everything. And I wrote 5 minutes of material, and most of it was just sound effects and things like that. My sound effects were the punchlines to the jokes, basically. I do a setup, and then I would do a quick vignette of a song, or a lot of them. My jokes were music based too, because I was a mobile disc jockey, and I was pretty steeped in pop culture and that, so I did a lot of that. And first time I did really well, killed, just had a great set. So I thought, I know what I'm doing. I'm going to bring out all my friends. They're going to come see me. I'm going to kill. I bring out all my friends, and I died. I bombed. I bombed so badly. And I thought, well, that's it, man. I'm never doing that again. So I went for about a year. I didn't have anybody come out to the show. I just kept working on my stuff, just kept working at it. And until finally, you get a little better. You get 5 minutes, and then you get 10. Then you go from 10 to 15, and then you start to get open spots on weekends. That's the most coveted spot, is a spot on a weekend, because it's a bigger crowd, and it's easier too. An open mic crowd, usually it's very small, and you get a couple of titters, and you don't know if it's funny or if it's funny or it's not funny. You don't really know. You need to have a full audience to figure out what's working and what's not. And not just once, it's got to happen several times. You need lots of stage time. I mean, I remember when I was living in New York, my wife and I, we were living there, and I used to work out at Catch a Rising Star. And some comics would they'd do 3 spots a night. They'd go to one club, they'd finish their spot there, they'd go to another club, work on the same material, write some more notes down, change a couple of words, then go to the next club, and then work out again. So by the end of the night, boom, you're laughing. When I was working out in Los Angeles, similar sort of thing. I would work out.
One second, I think we got a freeze. One second, buddy. I think we have a technical glitch here. Give me 1 second. Whoops. Uh-oh. Think we lost him, folks. Let me see if I can re-invite him. Oops. Sorry about that. I think we had a technical glitch there.
Yeah, I think internet.
Yeah. Yeah, you're doing good so far. Sorry about that, folks.
What are you
But,
gonna do? What are you gonna do?
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's keep going though. Let's keep going. A
Well,
lot of people.
so on the weekend, I thought, and then by the time I got to weekend and went to the clubs, I'd usually have a gig in the Midwest somewhere. That's when I really got to work it out, because it would be
Mhm.
1 or 2 shows a night, and I would kind of work things out that way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Now let me ask you personally. I saw you wear a lot of interesting outfits on America's Got Talent, and even when you met me, you had a nice one on. Where do you get your outfits from?
Uh, some of them were my wardrobe, and a couple of them were things that they bought for me. And
Ah,
they kind of dialed into what I liked and what I wore. It was pretty easy. When they
mhm.
showed up, uh, lately I've been into these Oppo suits, OPPO. And they make these suits. They're not that expensive. They're about $125 to $150. But they're colorful and they usually have themes. I've got about 2 Star Wars ones. They bought me a Pac-Man one and they bought me another one with Bam, Boom, Crash. It was kind of like a comic book thing, which was perfect for me. It's just exactly that's my wheelhouse. I like loud and crazy, just like my show. So, but my wardrobe was always a big thing for me starting out. Like I never knew what to wear on stage. Uh, I had a club owner say to me, he was an owner of a comedy chain up here in Canada. Mark Breslin was his name, and he ran Yuck Yucks. He founded Yuck Yucks, and he said to me, "You should wear a suit." And I never really understood what that meant, because I thought a suit, like, nah, at the time I was wearing sweats. I had sweatpants and a sweatshirt, but they had cartoon characters on them. That's what I wore. And I thought, nah, I need something that's comfortable so that I have some mobility. And, because I moved around on stage a lot, uh, I was really high energy. Then I said, you know what? He did say suits. I'm going to try it. And I tried it and I hated it. Like I just didn't feel comfortable wearing a suit. And it threw off my shows and my material. And I go like, well, there's got to be something to what he said. I'm just going to keep wearing the suit. And what I found out is that the audience didn't see it coming. It was kind of a stealth way of getting my material across. Like I'd come up and I'd look like I'm a lawyer and I'm about to represent you in court, and then or an accountant, and then the next thing uh, I'm doing this crazy stuff, taking my suit off and putting on different wigs and costumes, and that made the shock even bigger. And I went, oh, I get it. It's like being your own straight man. I get it. But I went through a long phase. I wore bow ties for a while. I wore nice sweaters, high-end things. I never wore a t-shirt on stage. I never liked wearing a t-shirt. But suit, it's funny though, because when I was a mobile disc jockey, I always wore a suit. But it just always felt very formal to me when it came to telling jokes. And then of course, remember back in the 80s, a lot of guys would wear suits. They wore jackets, but they'd push the arms up. Do you remember that? And they'd be all bunched up like this. They'd look like some history teacher. So it's really gone through a real evolution. Now it's quite casual. It's completely different now, what people wear on stage. But old school people, they like suits. They think, dress like a professional, number one, and number two, you should always dress better than your audience. I mean, they're paying to see you. And if you look just like them, well, then what the hell are they paying for? You might as well get their neighbor up there. So that's where it all came from.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, you gave me some great advice when I met you about writing. You think you could share that advice with our audience, for the comedians out there writing new jokes?
Give me a hint, because
It was something about when you wake up in the morning.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay. I read this book. Oh man, I think it was called Writing on the Left-Hand Side of the Brain. Is that it? I can't remember left-hand side. I think that's what it is. Anyway, in there was an exercise. They said when you wake up in the morning, do these morning pages. You write 3 pages of stream of consciousness. You just write whatever it is. You don't have to read it. You don't have to keep it. When you're finished, you take it, you throw it away, but you just write whatever comes into your mind. It's like starting your car. It warms up the engine, and it gets that flow going. The connection between here and your writing hand, and I don't know. There's a connection there that you don't get when you're typing on a keyboard. When you actually have a pen or pencil in your hand and you're just scratching, it's different. So I would say morning pages, number 1. Number 2, remember that writing is a lot like school, what you did in school, where the teacher is the straight person and you come up with the punchline. Remember that? How the teacher would always say something and then you'd have the smart ass answer afterwards?
Mm-hmm.
That's the basic structure of what a joke is. So, and I always liken it to that. And then when people think of it that way, they go, oh yeah, well, I've done that. I did that all through school. So I guess I can write. Well, of course you can. Otherwise, why would you be in this, But you just have to keep doing it. And you do it over and over again. And at first it doesn't work. And sometimes, a lot of times it's too wordy. So you've got to edit. And you've got to, economy of language. That's a big lesson that a lot of people don't realize, is that the longer it takes to get to the punchline, the bigger the punchline has got to be. So if it's just a little sort of punchline, you're not going to get a great response. You got to cut that thing down. I don't know why people are so verbose. I think it's just our schooling. We get into bad habits. Or when we're writing an exam or a paper, we got to go, what? I got to write 30 pages on Socrates. Filler. You just, or when you write an exam answer, you put you restate the question in your answer.
Can you explain the 1970s? 1970s and a brief statement.
Right?
Uh-huh.
Everybody does that.
That's when the teacher just reads it and goes, yeah, you didn't study. Yep.
Just take their big red pen and just exit. Mark it right out.
Oh, on the bottom. Nice try. Now, let me ask you this. Do we're in one of the craziest times in our life with this whole pandemic,
Yeah.
How do you see this impacting, say, comedy clubs? And what do you think the result's going to be from it?
Well, part of it I don't know, because it's day to day.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when the numbers go up that crazy and they start threatening to shut things down again, we're screwed. I mean, some of these clubs are not going to make it because they're smaller or they're already on the edge. So they ain't gonna make it. I'm sorry to say. I hope they do. I would like to see that happen. As you know, some of the things that they're asking these clubs to do, they're not conducive to comedy. For example, 6 feet of distance between each table. You want to get a good comedy audience, you sit them right tight, close together, and you turn all the lights off, and you have this intimacy, and people come together as an audience. But to have them 6 feet apart, I mean, you know what that's like. It's like an empty night on an empty Wednesday or Thursday night at a club, Mm-hmm. It can be okay, but it's not great. Then you add in the face mask to that, and you can't see anybody's expression. You can't read them. So as an artist, you're looking, and that's my whole thing, is reading the crowd. I can't see anything except from here up. That's all I can see. It's crazy. And then the other thing that I thought of that is really going to affect us is that think of all of these top dogs, the comedians that play the theaters. Well, the theaters aren't coming back this year. So they got to go to the clubs, which means what? Everybody gets bumped down a rung. Because, I mean, if you go like, what? I can get Brian Regan for this, for how much? Oh, yeah, okay, well, let's get Brian Regan in here. The guy who normally does the theaters, yeah, let's get him in here. And Brian Regan, he can go and he can work on his new hour or half hour. He can work on a new special. I mean, it's great. It sucks that he won't have the theaters anymore, but when this is all over, boom, he'll have a special. But everybody's going to get, it's going to be tough.
Oh, yeah.
But especially for, though, a lot of guys that make their living on the ships. Like, I don't know when the ships are going to come back. The cruise ships, It's got to be tough for a lot of those guys. Now, I heard one thing that they may end up doing 2 shows instead of 1. And believe me, that would be great. I don't think they will pay the twice the money. That's the only thing that's not so great about it. But you usually on a ship, you don't do more than 2 shows a week anyway, unless you're on Carnival, and then you do them. I think you do them every night.
Absolutely.
Like a regular, comedy club, and you get to do your half hour, and then you're done. Hopefully they get a different audience in the next time. And if they don't, then you switch it up a little bit, whatever. But we'll see what happens.
Absolutely. Now we have a request from the audience. For someone without representation, such as a manager or an agent, what's your advice for or approach to out-of-town comedy clubs you're featuring? I'll put the question on the screen for you.
Oh, okay. For someone, agent. Okay. Well, that's a tough one. I would say, number 1, don't go to an outside comedy club until you're ready. Because you will never get back into that club. They'll have you slotted, and they'll go like, oh, that person's still an amateur. They're not ready. It'll take you a long time. I'll give you a story, okay? First time I was just starting out. I had been in comedy for about 2 years, maybe 3, and I always wanted to work in New York. Well, I got my chance, Rochester, New York. So I'm going to this club, and my first time, and the audiences were completely different. I was not prepared. I did not do well, and I struggled for the whole week, and I never got back to Rochester for 10 years. I mean, it took that long to get back into that place. So a really good lesson well learned there is that don't try to expand before you're ready. That's number 1. Number 2. Stay away from the bottom feeders. Now, what I mean by that is if somebody comes up to you and they say that they want to represent you and you're still an open micer, run as far away as you flippin' can. Because what is 10 or 15% of nothing? It's nothing. That's ridiculous. Somebody's saying that they're going to represent you when you're an open micer and you're still figuring things out. You don't need that. They're just going to hold you back. They're not going to help you at all. I think that's ridiculous. You got to put in your time. There's no skipping ahead, or jumping the line. You just have to put your time in. That's all you can do. Now, I would say once you get to that point, then I would ask either a club owner or maybe someone else who has representation. But they have to really like you. They've got to be, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they've got to feel that you're ready. And a lot of times it'll be a headliner. A headliner will go like, listen, you shouldn't be opening anymore. You're too strong for the show. And I've seen that happen to a lot of people where they're in a position where they're emceeing, and there's no way they should be emceeing. They're far beyond that. But the club owner loves it. Why? Because they have a strong MC. A strong host can dictate a show. A strong host can get a show off to a great start, and you don't even have to work. The middle guy, you just basically you do your time and you're laughing. But if you're so strong that the middle guy, the feature act can't even follow you, then you need to move on to the next stop, the next place. So when that starts happening, then you need to think about where you want to move to and how you want to do it. But if you're going to burn your bridges, burn most of them locally. Because there's an old expression: you can't be a hero in your hometown. And you know how hard it is to get work in your hometown. It's difficult, almost impossible. And then when you get good, they never want to promote you. They never want to. They never want to move you up to feature act. You're the host forever and ever. And it's a terrible place to be in. But the crazy thing about it is, the host is one of the hardest jobs on the show. Now, in Canada, it's completely different. What happens in Canada is the host of the show is someone who has some of the most experience. They're usually someone who headlines regularly or is about to headline. And that's how they do it there. Why? Because number one, they have the most time and experience, which means if something goes wrong with the show, they can cover the time. Let's say the feature act doesn't show up, or the feature act bombs his or her ass off. Then the host comes back and says, "Okay, folks, that was exciting." And then they come up and then they do a whole bunch of time and they fill that gap, that 20 minutes that the feature couldn't handle. Or sometimes the headliner doesn't work out. How many times, you've seen that sort of thing happen, right? Where a headliner will bomb so badly and they'll have to leave the stage, and the club owner doesn't want people demanding their money back. So the host has got to go back up and complete the show, whatever that rest of that time is. It could be a half hour. Now, an opening act doesn't have that kind of time. And that's why I never understood why they had that kind of hierarchy. So if you're in the opening spot and you're hosting right now and you're getting a little restless, just be patient, because this is the fastest way to learn comedy. I know it doesn't seem like it, but you can learn a lot in the MC spot. A lot. You can learn crowd work. Now, unfortunately, with crowd work, usually they don't want you to do any crowd work, and that's because a lot of people aren't experienced enough to do crowd work, but it is a very important part of MCing. You have to do a little bit, you got to do birthdays and anniversaries and things like that. You got to do a little bit of that,
Mm-hmm.
And it's a way of learning how to get your own your personality across to the audience. That's when you are your most authentic self. And that's a hard thing to find. I remember when I was starting out, I go like, who am I? What is my character? Well, the answer to that is looking back at you in the mirror. But it's not that simple, because it's a caricatured person of that. It's slightly amplified. It's a little different, So how do you figure that out? Well, you've got to record your sets. You've got to listen objectively and take your set and listen to it on the tape and transcribe it. Find out all that superfluous language, cut it out, get it, just distill it, and start thinking about what your attitude and your emotions are on stage. Think about what the attitudes and the emotions that go with the joke. So if I tell a joke and it has there's an air of frustration or anger, well then, why am I not acting that on stage? I should be angry at this moment. Like, why does my wife leave it so that there's only one, my husband leaves it so that there's only one sheet of toilet paper on the toilet roll, and he never changes the damn toilet paper? That pisses me off. So you bring that frustration with it, and then people they hear that and they go like, yeah, why is that? And that's so true. And then you get the laughter of recognition, and then so there's a bit of acting involved. Now a lot of us that get into this stand-up comedy thing, we're not actors, and that's a whole nother skill, but you need to learn it. You need to, in order to take it to the next level. Otherwise, you're just a joke teller. You're a joke machine. I mean, I know joke writing is very, very important, and you should spend the majority of your time focusing on writing and structure, but performance is just as important, if not maybe more, because I've seen comics who are not great joke tellers are absolutely fabulous at selling their act. And, you'll go like, well, how did he get such a great laugh on that? This guy, that's such a lame joke. Well, the comedian sold it. That's how they did it, right? So the sell is so important. That's number one. And anyway, going back to the question, I wouldn't worry about the representation part. If it's going to happen, it will happen. Just worry about getting good. As long as you're good, somebody's going to want to represent you, and you want to be represented by a really good agency, someone that can get you a lot of work. But figure out what your goals are too. You should write down what your goals are. I want to be in how many clubs, or by a certain date, or I want to have these particular bookers as regular contacts, so that I can always go to them for work, or get on their list somehow, or I need a good car, a good road car. You got to start thinking of it this way, what your budget's going to be, and how you're going to make that leap from just being an amateur comic to a full-time comic, which is not an easy thing to do. And I would also say to focus on either what your next step is, either television or radio, film, whatever that might be, right, Nick? Because the clubs, you've got to remember, are the gym. And nobody makes it in the gym. Arnold Schwarzenegger didn't make it in the gym. I mean, he had to go to he went to competitions, and he went to things like that. And of course, that was one step that he took, weightlifting competitions and bodybuilding competitions. But film, movies, that's a whole nother thing. And that's the whole next level, right?
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. Now, what's your advice for people who are practicing comedy during this pandemic? Like, what should we be doing during this time, since we have so much of it now?
Well, write, obviously, study, read. You should be reading comic biographies. You could take that master class from
Steve Martin.
Steve Martin, thank you. There's a lot of great videos. You could watch some Tonight Show vids. Just study.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's important. You're not going to believe this. This is an important thing. I know it helped me. I don't know if it would help anybody out there or not, but music helps a lot. You should listen to music, because comedy is a lot like music. There's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of, there are rhythms in comedy. There are, especially rhythms. And I said that once to this one comic I was working with, Ron Schock, and he was an incredible storyteller. And if you get a chance, maybe look him up on YouTube. Ron Schock, Schock. And he was with the Outlaws of Comedy. You remember? Come on, help me out here. His name just went out of my head. Sam Kinison. Sam, yeah, Sam Kinison. And he used to hang out with Sam Kinison and who's the other guy who's really popular? Who's the other guy that everybody copies from that time? 80s. Do you remember?
80s. I know there's definitely like maybe some of my comedian buddies will help me out, but there's a ton of them. There's
This guy is famous.
yeah. I want to say some names, but I don't want to get the wrong years. You know.
He died. He died of not Dice. Unfortunately, he died of cancer.
Trying to think. Is he? I can't think of his name either, but I'm sure he's.
God, damn it. No, not Bobcat. No.
Okay.
Everybody's growing up with good names up here. Everybody copies him.
It's not what's his name? Because his name just flipped out of my head for a second. But I know his material. I think
Bill Hicks.
He'll come to us eventually.
It was Bill Hicks.
Bill Hicks. Okay.
Bill Hicks. Yeah. I don't know how I forgot Bill Hicks, for crying out loud. But anyway, and so he hung around with these guys, right? And these guys were legendary in comedy. And there aren't many of them left now. But I was watching him the way he was telling a story, and it was so cool. And I said, man, this is like a piece of music. And he said, you're right. He said, and it's funny that you should say that, because I've been on stage with a live band where I told my stories where the band would play. They would jam in the background as I'm telling the story. And it was so cool. So the comedian was kind of riffing almost like a jazz riff with the music. So cool. Music and comedy are so intertwined. I can't tell you. If you have any musical talent at all, I mean, that will help you a great deal with stand-up comedy.
Absolutely. Now let me ask you. I'm going to ask you two more questions. The first one. Now, what are you up to today during all this time? You know, what are some things that you've been doing?
Well, right now I've been working on a podcast, but I'm doing a regular podcast. I'm doing a podcast where I do all the voices.
Ooh, you have to send me a link to that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work because I just realized I've got to write the whole thing. I've got to write both parts. In some cases, I've got to write 3, 4, 5 different parts. So, but I've got the first episode done. The second episode is halfway finished, recorded. I want to get about 5 done, and then I'm going to put them out. And it's a Star Wars related podcast. So it's what if the Empire had you know how we have Rush Limbaugh, or we have shock jocks and or right-wing radio, and they're often bombastic type characters. And I thought, wouldn't this be so cool if a guy like that were the host of a radio program in that universe, in a galaxy far, far away? And he did these shows for the Empire. And so he'd crap all over the rebels, you know, but the Empire, they were the best, and that's where you should go.
So I came up with this voice here, and this is
what I did was I Star Wars'd my name.
Mm-hmm.
If you take the first 3 letters of your first name, and you take the first 3 letters of your last name, you put them together, that's your Star Wars name. So my name is Grimo. So exactly. Nick Sore. That sounds like you just got back from the clinic. So
anyway, I'll talk about this. This is a welcome to Voice of the Empire, and that's the name of the show. It's Voice of the Empire, where we talk about issues that matter to you. Well, maybe not to you, but they matter to the Empire, so they're going to matter to you. And every week I have guests on, or sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just have an open line call. I have people call in, Gungans. We should know that you should be calling some people, because it's very offensive. And
what are you talking about? Just crazy stuff. Then I put in my own commercials. I got a commercial for blue milk. Now it's so satisfying. I've got the footprints in the desert. Tatooine. It's hot and dry, and you're thirsty. And the only thing that can satisfy that thirst is a nice, cool glass of blue milk. Bantha milk. Sponsored by the moisture farmers of Tatooine. And as I'm saying this, you can hear the milk pouring into the glass, and it's so crazy wild. It's 2 guys in a truck. I've got 2 guys in a ship, or 1 guy in a Wookiee in a ship, or and they, instead of moving your stuff, they smuggle your stuff around the galaxy. Just different commercials. CPAP machine for Darth Vader, things like that. Just crazy things, whatever I can come up with. And there's always a commercial break in the center, and then we come back on the other side. And people phone in death threats. It's crazy. So it's going to be something crazy will happen every episode, and then it kind of carries over, and it's episodic. So I'm working on season 1. I'm not sure how many episodes I'm going to do, and then I'll do season 2, and I want to set it in each kind of part of the universe. So, but it's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
And
you're going to have to send me the link for that.
The creature that I'm basing it on is a basilisk. So if you watched the prequels, do you remember Dex?
Mm-hmm.
In the what was that one? In the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And he works at the diner. Remember that great big guy, and he's got 4 arms and 2 legs?
Mm-hmm.
It's that species. Depending on how much is in your pocketbook. So that's where I kind of got that grit from the voice. I went like that, but I kind of gave it more of a lazy kind of thing. And then, but anyway, so that's what I'm working on right now. And I'm working on some virtual shows. I just had one come to me last week. I'm working on that. And just writing down some ideas for when I get to go back up on stage, which will be in July. Towards the end of July, I think it's the 22nd. I'll be at the, let me have a quick look here. At the, let's see here. Wow, it's Comedy Cabana in Myrtle Beach, which just had an out. Oh, that's great. Thanks. So we'll see how that goes. I'll be there all week. And that's it.
Absolutely. Now, my final question, and I'm glad one of my audience members brought this up. Let's end on a high note.
You're not
on a series of impressions for us, just like a freestyle impression.
I think doesn't he sound like this? He's a lot like this, isn't he? That's what Elf sounds like. He's kind of,
Mm-hmm.
Now, the funny story, I worked on Elf the cartoon, believe it or not. And
Really?
I was his little brother or something like that.
And his name was like this. Hey, Gordon.
He sounded a lot like that. So if you look at my name under IMDb, you'll see that. That's one of the credits. That's one of the shows I worked on was Elf the cartoon. I worked on Police Academy the cartoon. I worked on Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I was a director on that. I also directed voice for Hammerman with MC Hammer. MC Hammer had his own cartoon for about a minute. And but I worked on a lot of different shows. Hello Kitty, that was the first cartoon I worked on.
and the name of the character was Grinder, and he was a dog, and he sounded like this.
So the direction that they gave to me is we want somebody who sounds a bit like Fred Gwynn from Car 54. And they said, do you remember Car 54? I go like, well, just barely, because it was in the 50s. And Fred Gwynn, for those of you in your audience who don't remember, he played the judge in My Cousin Vinny. That would be a more recent reference. Or for some of you who are real geeks, if you remember the Munsters, he played Herman Munster. That's what Greg Gwynn was. But anyway, he was a cop on Car 54, and he would get, when he got excited, he would go like, oh, 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 oh. And so was my signature thing for my character. I'd go, oh, oh, hey, oh. It was just amazing working on that show. And, sometimes I'd be doing more than one voice because it was called Hello Kitty's Fairy Tale Theater. And you can still find them. I mean, I've been in grocery stores and at Target. I saw a couple of copies of it at Target. This a few months ago. Hello Kitty's Fairy Tale Theater. Have a look for it. And if you look on the back, you'll see my name in the credits. Hopefully they haven't taken it off. But I was the voice of that and several other different voices in the show. And they'd give us at least, one or two extra. We get to audition for different voices in the show. And it was so much fun, different characters. And at the end of the season, the director came up to me and he says to me, listen, you have a background in animation, right? I go, yeah, I've done a lot of this. I've done some voices and for student films. He says, well, how would you like to direct? I go like, what? Are you kidding? What? Is there anybody else in the room? I couldn't believe it. So, because it would cost them a lot of money to fly somebody up from Los Angeles to work on their show. So I got to work on directing voice for animation. And one of the first shows I worked on was the Super Mario Brothers Super Show. Remember that, where Captain Lou Albano was Super Mario? Do you remember that? And it had live action wraparounds. Now, I didn't do any of the live action wraparounds, but I directed the voice for the characters for the cartoon and that. And it was so cool at the time because I was such a huge gamer, and I had this Nintendo, and my wife and I would play Super Mario Brothers, like, oh gosh, till about 2-3 in the morning, stay up trying to get to the next level on that darn thing. Finally did beat that game. Remember that? That's when games were really hard.
Oh yeah. That's the
moment. Secret levels and
that's the moment. Your wife, honey, come back to bed. Be right there. Be right there. Almost done.
I'm almost on the next world. I'll be right with you.
Absolutely.
The next level.
Absolutely. I'm this close to being Bowser. There's another question from the audience.
Of Cameo.
Mm-hmm.
What's Cameo?
I think he means like with the voices that you do, or
Well, you get money from you get residual checks from your animation work, but a lot of this work was done in the 90s. So that was me coming right practically out of college, really.
Mm-hmm.
Late 80s, early 90s was when I started getting into voice.
Cameo is when you play people to play direct messages.
Oh, yeah. Now I know what you're talking about. Yes, I just saw that the other day. Yeah. Funny you should mention that because my agent just sent me that a few days ago. And he said, hey, Greg, what do you think of this? I said, yeah, I'm all for it because, obviously with this pandemic going on, we're not going to, this is a great way to get some extra income. And I'd love to do that, I've done it as favors for other people, just saying happy birthday to different people in a funny voice. So yeah, exactly. It's a great way to get extra money. Kill it, you know.
And then three different voices.
So
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Hello? Yep. Like I said, let's end on a high note. Do you think you could do a little freestyling for us? Little freestyling characters?
yeah, okay, here we go.
We play. Thanks for the sour persimmon buster.
Hey, friend.
Like wow, Scoop. Yeah. Remove Jetson. You're fired.
Hi, diddly dee. An MBA for me. Oh, gosh.
Oh, hi. Whoa, slow me down.
That was amazing. I applaud you. And I actually have a funny story for you. She's going to murder me later when she hears this. But I showed your Star Wars video to my girlfriend for the first time the other day.
Mhm.
And she was clapping. And she's like, I don't know why I'm clapping. He can't hear me. But still.
People who wear a mask in their car.
Exactly. Exactly. So, anyways, thank you so much for joining us. This is one of our best episodes yet. You know, you have been a great buddy to me.
You shouldn't have members of your family on the show. I mean, what are they going to know? What do they know about comedy?
Good point. I'll just send that to my,
Get started in motherhood.
yeah. I'll just send that to her later as I'm as she's pulling out the wooden spoon.
Your daddy got me drunk, and
Yeah. As she's pulling out, say I'm not funny one more time, boy. I dare you.
I dare you. I double dog dare you.
Uh-huh. Anyways, to my buddies out there, this is my good buddy Greg Morton. Thank you so much for being on the show. Stick around afterwards. There's someone I want you to meet. But thank you so much. You are incredible. You're very talented. I desperately hope you come back to Erie one day. And if so, you and me are getting lunch.
Oh, I'll be coming back. Even if it's passing through, I'll be on my way to Cleveland.
Let me know.
All right, good. Thanks.
To all my buddies out there, we'll catch you next time on Buddy.
Name for a podcast, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. But we'll catch you next time here on Buddycast. Have a good night.